This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this talk we're going to study Aesop's fable of the kite and the pigeons. The kite and the pigeons. Now it's important for us to understand before we get into this fable that the word kite here does not refer to the toy that children play with, a kite on a string, but to a certain kind of bird. A kite is a bird. We might compare it to a hawk or a falcon. It's a bird that's considered a predator. And so this fable is about a kite, a predator bird, and some pigeons. The kite and the pigeons. Let's read the fable together, and then we'll talk about the details, the moral lesson, and the application of this fable in our own lives. Aesop's fable of the kite and the pigeons. A kite that had kept sailing around a dovecote for many days to no purpose was forced by hunger to have recourse to stratagem. Approaching the pigeons in his gentlest manner, he tried to show them how much better their state would be if they had a king with some firmness about him, and how well his protection would shield them from the attacks of the hawk and other enemies. The pigeons, deluded by this show of reason, admitted him to the dovecote as their king. They found, however, that he thought it part of the king's prerogative to eat one of their number every day, and they soon repented of their credulity in having let him in. This is the fable of the kite and the pigeons. So we read that there was a kite, and the kite, as I said, was a predator bird, like a hawk, that was flying up above the dovecote. A dovecote is a house for doves or pigeons in this fable, and we can compare it to a chicken coop. Now, in our generation, we don't think much about doves or pigeons, but if you do a simple search on the internet, you can learn that men kept and raised doves and pigeons for thousands and thousands of years. Doves and pigeons were an important part of society, an important animal to be raised and kept for a number of different benefits, and these might surprise you. Most obviously, doves and pigeons were kept for meat. They were eaten. A chicken or a turkey provides a lot of meat at one time. And sometimes that much meat might not be desired, whereas a pigeon might provide an individual person with just enough for a meal. And so many people kept and ate smaller birds that were considered almost like one serving size. So pigeons and doves were raised for meat. Pigeons were also raised to carry messages back in older generations. In our generation, there's a lot of excitement about drones, and we think it's cool that we can have a machine that's remote controlled, that we can fly around and make it do stuff. We can fly it around and take pictures. But as the drones get stronger and faster, they're beginning to be used to do other things, like carry packages. There are some businesses that are experimenting with having drones deliver packages. But in the past, nature had already provided men with drones. They were pigeons. Pigeons could be used to carry messages. A man could write a message on a piece of paper, tie the message to the foot of the pigeon, and send it off. And the pigeon could be trained to carry messages to a certain location. So they could be used like drones, and some were even used to carry small packages. So men used pigeons through history to serve useful purposes and also to be eaten as a source of meat. So men kept pigeons and doves safely in what was called a dovecote or a pigeon house on the farm, similar to how men keep chickens in a chicken coop. And above the dovecote, this kite was flying around and around, circling over the dovecote, waiting for the pigeons to come out. And when the pigeons would come out, he would swoop down and grab hold of them and eat them one by one. Again, just as a hawk would do with chickens. And so one day, or a few days, the kite was sailing around and around, waiting for the pigeons to come out from the house, and they never came out. They kept themselves safe, protected inside the house. In fact, they were so safe that the kite couldn't get them. The kite couldn't attack them because they were protected by their house. And so the kite has to figure out, because he's getting hungry, he has to figure out another way. How can he get a pigeon? So he decides to come up with a plan, and this is what the word stratagem means. A strategy, a plan to accomplish a goal. He has to find a way to get into the dovecote because the pigeons won't come out. How can I get into the dovecote? Well, he can't present himself as a friend of the pigeons because all the pigeons know that he's much bigger and stronger than them, and they'd be afraid of him. So he has to come up with a strategy, and he decides that he can't pretend to be an equal because they won't fall for that. So he's got to admit that he's bigger and stronger, but he has to explain that his strength and size is not a danger to them, but actually a source of benefits. So he says to the pigeons, "How about this? How about I come and live with you? Of course, I'm not one of your equals. I'm much bigger and stronger than you are. But how about I live with you as a king? I sort of be your ruler and protector. I'll take responsibility to keep you safe from the hawks and some of your other enemies." And the pigeons, because pigeons and doves are considered to not be very smart animals, they're usually considered very simple, they think and say, well, you know what, I think that sounds like a good idea. So the pigeons welcome the kite into their house to be their king, to provide them with protection. It seems like it might be a good arrangement. And so the kite moves in with the pigeons. Now, obviously, if one is a king and one promises to provide benefits for all of his subjects, there must be some reward, there must be some benefit received by the king. And the pigeons find out that the king's benefit will be that he gets to eat one of them each day. So they all can enjoy safety, knowing that he's only going to take one of them each day. Maybe that's a good deal. But after a while, they begin to realize that this isn't a good deal, and they repent of having let the kite in. And we assume that they might have chosen to drive him out by making some noise and fussing, attracting their owner to come and see what was wrong and chase the kite out from the dovecote. And this is the fable of the kite and the pigeons. Now, what we have to think about to understand this fable is the original situation. What was the original situation that started this whole thing? The problem in the beginning was not that the pigeons were in danger. The problem was that the kite was unable to get the pigeons. The kite was hungry. That was the problem. Now, when the kite comes to the pigeons, he doesn't say that. He doesn't come and say, "I'm so hungry." Obviously, that would be a terrible stratagem. The kite suggests to the pigeons that they need his help because they're in danger. They're in danger of these hawks and all their other enemies. But if the pigeons were in danger, why would the kite be coming and trying to get to them by this strategy? The fact that the kite was coming to them with this strategy was actually proof that they were safe already in their dovecote. The kite knew that the pigeons were already safe, but this was bad for him because he needed the pigeons to come out where it's dangerous, where he could attack them and take hold of them and eat them. Their safety was his problem. But he comes to them and he deceives them. He deceives them and leads them to think that they're in danger when in fact they're already safe. And the fable tells us that they were deluded. That means deceived by the kite. And they chose to let their enemy into the pigeon house where they were safe. So they fell for his deception, his lie, his trick. The pigeons fell for it, and they let him in. And then all of a sudden they found that what was actually happening was not that this kite was keeping them safe, but he was simply getting what he wanted in a tricky way. He was content to eat them one by one, rather than attack them out in the open. And once the pigeons realized this, it says they repented. They were sorry for what they had decided. They changed their minds. And they learned the hard way that they couldn't trust a kite to protect them when it was his nature to eat them. Now, to explain the meaning of this fable, I'd like to have you think about an event that actually happened in history. And if you're in world chronology, you may have studied this. It's the story of the Trojan War. A long, long time ago, around 1200 BC, there was a war between the people of Troy, a great city, and the Greeks. It's called the Trojan War because it's named for the city Troy. Really, it would be better to call it the Trojan War, but it's pronounced Trojan in English. The Trojan War. For 10 years, the Trojans fought with the Greeks. The Greeks tried to attack and destroy the city of Troy, and the Trojans fought them off. For 10 years, the Trojans faced the danger of the Greeks. And the Greeks couldn't find a way to conquer their enemy, to destroy the city of Troy. And so finally the Greeks, like the kite in this story, turned to a stratagem. And what they decided to do was offer the city of Troy a gift. They decided to pretend that they were no longer interested in fighting, and that they wanted instead to offer a gift to the Trojans, a gift that they would enjoy because of their religion, which would appreciate this gift. And so the Greeks constructed a large wooden horse. You may have heard of the Trojan horse. It was actually a Greek horse. The Greeks made this horse, a big wooden horse, and it was empty inside. And what the Greeks did was they hid some of their soldiers inside this wooden horse. And they put the horse on wheels so that they could move the horse up to the gate of the city of Troy. And they said, "Look, Trojans, we'd like to make peace. We offer you this gift, this beautiful wooden horse, as a gift that you can offer to your goddess to celebrate the end of this fighting." And the Trojans, deluded by the stratagem of the Greeks, accepted the gift and brought it into the city. They closed the gates of the city with the horse inside. And the Trojans celebrated for the day. They celebrated that the fighting was over and they were going to have peace, and at night they all went to sleep. And when they went to sleep, a traitor in the city ran to the horse, opened the door that the Greeks had built in the horse, and let the soldiers out of the horse inside the city. The soldiers then ran to the gate of the city and opened the gates. The Greeks, after they left the horse at Troy, sailed away, but at night they turned around in their ships and came back to the coast. When the soldiers got out of the horse, they ran to the gates. They threw open the gates. The Greek ships returned, and all the Greek soldiers rushed into the city and destroyed the city of Troy. As a result of this trick or deception of the Greeks, there is a saying, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. If you're a Trojan, you should never think that a Greek with a gift is innocent. The Greeks are your enemies, and you should beware of Greeks bearing gifts. In other words, beware when your enemies come to you and act as though they wish to be friends, because it might be a trick. Beware of your enemies. Don't trust your enemies. That would be the moral lesson of Aesop's fable of the kite and the pigeons. Don't trust your enemies. Now, when we look at Aesop's fable, it's important for us to see that the way that the kite decided to try to trick the pigeons was political. As I said before, the pigeons were already safe and happy, but the kite had to convince the pigeons that they actually weren't safe or happy. He had to create the idea in the mind of the pigeons that they were in danger and needed to be protected. He also deceived them to think that because there were other enemies that were dangerous to them, trusting one of their enemies might be a good idea. Rather than tell the pigeons why they should trust him, he made the pigeons think about how the other enemies might be more dangerous. And the pigeons, being simple, fell for it and let him in. He used politics, he used government to trick the people. He used politics to trick people into believing that he was interested in their good, when in fact he had only his own good in mind. And he was just as much an enemy to them as any of the hawks or other birds, any foxes, possums, any other animals that might threaten the pigeons. They were just as dangerous as the kite. But he tricked them. He deluded them. And they agreed to have him be their governor, and basically allowed this enemy of theirs to attack them under an appearance of being their protector. And so we can see that one very clear application of this fable is to be careful of politicians. To be careful and to not trust people who are normally not our friends but our enemies, who suddenly claim to have some interest in helping us and keeping us safe. Because it's not likely that they're really interested in keeping us safe. They're just thinking about themselves. And we often see this in government, where politicians try to persuade us that there is some problem we need to worry about. And this is what you see in the news every day. There's always some problem. While we live in peace and safety, they try to persuade us that there's some great problem that we need to worry about. They trick us into thinking we're in such great danger that it's worth trusting someone dangerous. Why would we trust someone dangerous? Oh, because the trouble you're in is far more dangerous. And this is a common stratagem. How people deceive us. How people who are our enemies, who have no interest in our good, but are simply seeking their own benefit, can trick us by making us think that we're in such great danger from outside sources that they are worth trusting. It's a clever trick. And to beware of this trick is the moral of the fable of the kite and the pigeons. It's easy for us to think of more applications. For example, if there were a few kids in a family, brothers and sisters, and one brother's always nasty to his sisters. He's always nasty. He's always being mean to them, taking their stuff, breaking their toys, hitting them, scratching them, being nasty. He's always nasty to his sisters. And finally, one day, while the girls are playing, this brother comes up and tries to be friendly. And he says, Mom and Dad are going to take all your toys away. You should give them to me, and I'll keep them safe in my room. And he leads his sisters to think that Mom and Dad taking their toys away is such a great danger that they would be better off giving their toys to him and letting him watch them for them. And this is just a trick. So you can think of many different ways someone might lead you to think that there's some other danger that you have to worry about that should lead you to trust them, even though you know or might think that they are dangerous themselves. This is the trick or the stratagem that Aesop warns us about in this fable. So study this fable, study all the details, make sure you can provide a paraphrase and explain the fable. Understand why Aesop would choose to use a kite and the pigeons. Make sure you understand what a dovecote is and why pigeons were kept. Make sure you pay attention to the fact that the pigeons were safe in the beginning, but were told they were in danger by the kite, and that they agreed to let him in because he promised to protect them from greater dangers, and they were deluded. Think about an application of this fable for your own life. And remember, as I always say, there are many lessons in these fables that we need to draw out by reading all the details and meditating on them. So if you think of anything that I didn't mention that you think is important, please share it with me. Because these fables are much richer than simple moral lessons. There's a lot that can be drawn out of these fables the more we reflect on them. So please do that and let me know if you have any interesting thoughts you think might be worth sharing. I hope that's helpful. God bless your studies.